Okay.
Hey there. We're just about to start work on restoring Ionnsachaidh's frame for is this the third or the fourth or the fifth season? I forget.
I think third.
Third season? Third or fourth? We'll go back and look. Doesn't matter. The information is going to leap back and forth a little bit because I'll talk a little bit about the skin now, but I'll be talking much more about it later. Now, first season, we had put a traditional tarred canvas skin on. It worked for about a year because we independently confirmed that UV just beats the hell and tears it to bits. We replaced that with a canvas skin that was painted with marine paint, or at least plain old oil Tremclad, which worked great until it failed because, again, UV, right? It made it fragile. So what we're going to do this year is we're going to do some upgrades to the frame, some much needed maintenance to the frame. We're not going to go whole hog. We're going to, because it's Ionnsachaidh learning curve, we're still learning best practices from this. So I can justify everything we're going to do and also everything we're not going to do, because our primary goal is to get this stabilized and safe so we can get it back on the water so we keep our team rowing. Lessons learned will be translated to the new boat that I intend to start working on once Ionnsachaidh is back in the water. So starting back at the stern, we see the perhaps over ornate system of knees that I built. A traditional carry naval, there's just one strut, one vertical piece like this. But I went a little bit nuts with 1, 2 knees, mostly because I was just having fun with it, right? Because I'm mathematically not very bright, but I was sort of celebrating the fact that I could do compound bevels, and I went a bit nuts with it. I defend it because, you know, it's not overly ornate, but it's strong. It's held up for, you know, several seasons of hard use. So I may not do that in future boats, but I stand by my reasons for doing it on this one. The lower cross section of the transom in the next boat, I'm going to make it deeper because we need more bedding surface for the stringers to land on. The stringers, these 4 middle ones they were cut from floor joists of a building that was built sometime before 1913 up at BC Women's. For a while it was the home for unwed mothers. I was born there. So it doesn't take Freud to figure out why I bought all that wood and I used it to build my shop and also to build a boat. But this stuff's getting a bit tired. It served us well, but you got to think of well, this was face grain, but it's edge grain now. This was something out of something like a 22 foot 3x14 that was absolutely clear, and that was considered construction grade wood in those days. So it's had its time though. So we're going to replace these, and we're going to replace them with ones of the same dimension, because it's the net effect of a basket, right? Flexes rather than breaks. And we're going to copper rivet these. We've lashed them. I was astonished how well the nylon lashings have persisted. But once we put the nylon skin on, we expect more than 2 seasons of use. And therefore, I don't want to get the skin on and then a year into it find that my lashings are giving out. So we're going to copper rivet the stringers from front to rear. Now, moving along, remember, well, actually I didn't show you, but during the construction process, we'd used copper nails rather than the wooden wedges that are usually used to brace or to pin the ribs, so that the ribs just don't keep pushing down when the boat's sitting upright. The copper nails worked pretty well. In fact, they worked really well when we come up here. Now here we are. There's one, and here's another where the one on the other side we have a couple that have actually bent. This one's just slipped down, and I believe this is what's telling me is that despite my best efforts, I think this rib was just that little bit too proud, and the rest of the boat basically forced it into position, which is why that failed. If I'd had a wooden key through there, a wooden peg, that peg might have broke or the rib might have split. So lesson learned here, I'm going to refasten it at this depth, right? So I think I think unintentionally, that was actually a really good idea, because the copper gave rather than something else breaking. Now, when you look at the boat, it looks like it just got unearthed from an ancient tomb, right? It looks really old, but that's just because the wood's been permeated with the boiling tar the first season, the marine paint of the second season, and a winter's weathering. So again, we're going to replace some of the stringers. We're going to fasten them all. But here's something that actually scares me. Is we look here, here's the underside of a thole hole. Now, thole pins are generally an inch thick. And the reason for that dimension is from the invention of the corn broom, curach users have been stealing their wives' kitchen brooms and cutting up the handles to use for thole pins. So a curach man sleeping out in the boat shed is not a new phenomenon, because he's in the doghouse, so to speak. The problem is that hole is so wide relative to this narrow gunnel. Now we're going to increase the gunnel to 3 inches. So I think the law that must be no greater than or less than 1/3 of the total width of the piece. In the future one, I think I'm going to shoot for 1/2 inch or 5/8 solid rod, just because it's a smaller hole is a better proposition. But this scares me, because this could break. Even though it's reinforced by a piece of hardwood on the outside, the hardwood reinforcement really is only the width of that. So you think there was a hidden bit of curl in the grain in there, or a little bit of rot, this breaks off and it's a catastrophic failure. At the very least, you've lost the use of a pair of oars. At the very worst, the boat's broken and you're in deep, deep doo-doo. So I think for this one, I think I'm going to scrounge around and find a piece of metal about 3/8 of an inch thick and bed it to the underside to be an extra layer of security. Moving forward, the shoulders, hardwood shoulders, they've absolutely held up. This is great. The bow, if you remember, a traditional bow follows about that curve and it's just stringers. But in this case, I had this wonderful grown crook of one of the cedar species. It's not red cedar. It might be white cedar or yellow cedar. But when I harvested this, I looked at it and I thought, it's perfect. This is the boat shape I want. And this meant we could go for a concave bow, because the concave means that we have, when we hit a wave, we don't just get buoyancy, we also get dynamic thrust. As the force of the wave is diverted by the concave surface, we're actually getting dynamic thrust. And we hit that, do you remember we hit that one rogue wave out of
Yes.
It was actually a wake, but for whatever reason, this wake was 3 times higher than the rest of the waves. And we went up this thing.
Scary, Ryan.
It was. We met it on the quarter rather than strictly bow on. But even so, we went up like an elevator. It was like a ride at the exhibition. It was a bit scary. So I think that concave shape, I like it, but I think it's also indivisible. It's part and parcel with this fuller bow that I made. Because if you look back at the first video, this isn't a traditional curach bow. This is much more. This shape is much more. In fact, it's literally and directly influenced by the wooden fishing boats of this coast. And this is me, my lifetime of looking at local boats and deciding that we're going to take advantage of their knowledge and experience, that they've designed their boats this way for local waters. So shall we. I think the next boat I build will have a traditional curach bow, but I also think, therefore, that, well, I haven't made up my mind yet whether it'll be a concave or a convex slope or bow shape, because the narrower bow, I believe that the original builders used a convex shape. Therefore, I'm inclined to agree with it. That's possibly the best course of action for there. So what we're going to do, we're going to clean the outside surface of the upper gunnel. We're going to clean it down to bare wood. We're going to fit and fasten a 1-inch square cedar strip along this to laminate it out to restore it to its proper dimensions of 1x3. Following that, we're going to start replacing some stringers. We're going to copper rivet the whole mess, and then take out the lashings. And then from there, once this is all good to go, we'll load it on the truck. We'll take it down to the boatyard where we actually have a covered, heated shop. We can get the skin on it, get it painted, get it in the water, and start having adventures again. Thank you. Hey, so when you look down, we rummaged through our selection of wood in the shed, and we've come up with these 1x1 yellow cedar strips, and they've got to be 15 feet, I guess. And they were from another project, some kayak in the distant past that didn't get built. But beautiful, straight grained. They're crowned on one surface, so, but whatever. So we've clamped it in place, we've dry fit it, and now I'm going to mark the positions for the screws, drill and countersink the screw heads, and then if we have the light, if we have the temperature, we could bed this with the Gorilla compound. Although, no, thinking as I talk, we won't. I'll take a trip down to the marine supply store and pick up some polysulfide, the Sikaflex, the wonderful marine bedding compound, which acts like a glue, and it's phenomenal stuff. Later on, you can hear Lisa's opinion about what happens when I have an open can of this stuff, because I wander around looking for things to glue, and things quickly go sideways. I wanted to, actually coming forward, I wanted to show you something else that was lessons learned here. You see these spacers in the bow. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on either side, and they're round. Traditionally they're round, and I believe they are that way so that you can tuck things behind them. You can use them as a belaying pin, as it were. Now, I just cut these out of, what is this, 1.5 inch dowel, and put a saw cut in each end, and then, as you can see, drove in a wedge, and it was pretty good. But it wasn't good enough, because you can see this is proud, it's sticking up, and it was sticking up on the upper side as well, because the compressive force of the skin was pulling all this together. So evidently what our predecessor shoulder for the gunnel to press against. So I mean, we could tap these things out and we could replace them with turned plugs that we made on a lathe. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sister them on either side with pieces that will act as a shoulder for this boat. For the next boat, we'll do it proper from the beginning. You can see this one's very proud as well. So we're going to have to tap that in place and then bolster it so it doesn't collapse like that again. Okay, so there we go. Thanks.